Okay, so this little video is to just take you through the idea of the cash flow forecasting. So cash flow is a really important concept for a business, particularly in the short term. Okay, so cash flow is very different to profit. Profit is much more of a long-term objective for a business, but cash flow is really important in the short run. Okay, so that's a very important thing to note. We can say that cash flow is vital in the short run. Okay, and it's especially important for a startup business. Okay, most startup businesses obviously don't have huge amounts of cash available to them, so cash flow is also vital for a startup business. Okay, and that's a really important thing to note, given that we're kind of looking at startup businesses during the Buzz One section of the course. So cash flow is a really important thing, and a cash flow forecast, as the name suggests, is when a business owner thinks about what's going to be happening in the year ahead, when money is coming into the business, when money is going out of the business, to make sure that they stay what we call solvent. Okay, solvent, which means that they are able to pay their bills. Okay, and it's a really important thing for a business to ensure that they are going to have enough money available. Obviously, if they don't have enough money available to pay their bills, then they may well end up in bankruptcy proceedings. And as we've already seen, if they have unlimited liability, that could be a really serious problem for them. So the ability to stay solvent for a business is absolutely vital, and a cash flow forecast is a really useful exercise for a business manager to do, to think about the money which is going to be coming into and out of the business during the course of a year. It also is a very useful thing to go and show banks if you're looking for overdrafts or loans or anything like that, so that you can give them some kind of indication about when you need the money and how long you're going to need it for and how much you're going to need. So really, really useful exercise in terms of actually doing a cash flow. So this is the basic way that a cash flow forecast appears. Okay, now there are various different forms, but provided you are kind of able to do the thinking processes that we're about to go through, if it doesn't look exactly like this, that won't be all that much of a problem, because you'll be able to think your way through it anyway. But let's just kind of have a think about what we've got here. So opening balance, okay, this means how much cash in the bank. Okay, at the start of the month. So at the start of January, how much cash do they have in the month? Sales income is relatively straightforward. That's obviously the money that they are making by selling their products. Borrowings is any money that they might borrow from the bank or from family members or something like that to get them started. Those added up will obviously then give you your total inflows. Okay, so when we talk about cash flow, we have inflows, which is money coming into the business, and outflows, which is money that the business has to spend. So some examples of things that they will have to spend money on are things like materials, wages for their workers, and then probably going to be other costs as well, maybe rent for their premises, those sorts of things. All of those added together make the total outflows. Okay, so in any given month, you're going to have money coming into the business, your inflows, and you're going to have money going out of your business, and those are your outflows. So let's just kind of have a little bit of a think. So if we are starting off in January, okay, this is when our business is starting. So our opening balance at this point is going to be zero. Okay, we have no money in our bank account when the business starts. All right. Now we are going to make some sales in our first month. So let's say that we are going to make £2,000 worth of sales in the first month, and we are going to take out a loan, okay, for £6,000, and that gives us for January, total inflows of cash into the business of £8,000. Okay, so those are our inflows for January. Now, we are going to have some outflows as well. So let's say that our materials are going to cost us £4,000. Okay, we are also going to have to pay our staff £2,200. And we're also going to have other costs maybe our advertising, our rent, as I said before, something like that, of £1,500. So that means our total outflows for January are going to be £7,700. So that gives us our January figures. So how much inflow and how much outflow do we have in January? So now we kind of go down to the bottom two lines, which are generally standard. So regardless of what that middle bit looks like, and different businesses will set that out in different ways, the bottom bit is normally the same, which is net monthly balance. So that means the net is the inflows minus the outflows. Okay, so what is the kind of the overall situation? So obviously if we had 8,000 coming in and we had 7,700 going out, that means we had a net balance of 300, the difference between the two. Now, what we then have to do is add this net monthly balance onto our opening balance that we had at the start, okay, to give us our closing balance. So we had 0 at the start in the bank, we have a net monthly balance of 300, so at the end we have 300. Okay, so at the end of the month of January, we are forecasting that we will have £300 in the bank. So this is just modelling really the money that's going to come in and out during the month of January. What happens now, though, is that obviously that 300 is also going to be in our bank account at the start of February. So this 300 then becomes our opening balance at the start of February. So always when you're doing a cash flow, the closing balance of the month before becomes the opening balance of the following month. Okay. Now that we're a little bit more established, we're going to sell £3,600 worth of stock. Okay, we are not going to borrow any more money in this month. Okay, so our total inflows are going to be £3,600. Okay, materials, we no longer need to buy our big kind of bulk startup amount of materials. So our material cost is going to be lower, let's say £1,500 this month. Wages for staff, though, are going to be about the same, 2,200, okay, and there are going to be a reduced amount of other costs, okay, things like our marketing and so on, things like that we've already done, okay, these are the costs of setting up the business. So now that we're a month in, those will start to reduce, hopefully, okay. So this then gives us a total outflow of £4,120 in this month. Okay. Now, what we can see here is that actually the net monthly balance in February is going to be negative. Okay, in February we spend £4,120 and we only take in £3,600, which means that it's going to be £520, but importantly, it's going to be negative. And to do that, we put it in brackets. Okay, so putting it in brackets indicates that it's negative. So I started off the month, if you remember, with £300 in my bank. I had 3,600 coming in, I had 4,120 going out, which gave me a net monthly balance of 520 down. So if I had 300 at the start and I'm 520 down for the month, that means at the end of the month I will be 220 down. So we put it in brackets again. As before, that number now becomes our opening balance for March. Okay, so we start March, £220 out. Okay. Sales continue to grow as the business continues to perform well. Still no borrowing. Okay, so our inflows £5,000. Materials, again, we just need a little bit of material purchase to kind of keep our stock levels high enough. So let's say 1,100 for that. Wages, again, will be the same. Okay, wages tend to be consistent through the year, really. Other costs, okay, same other costs as the month before. These are our ongoing monthly rents, let's say. Okay, so total outflows in this month then of £3,720. Okay, which is just those three outflow numbers added up. So our net monthly balance is our 5,000. Okay, so it's our £5,000 inflow. Subtract from that our £3,720 of cash outflow, gives us our net monthly balance of 1,280. Okay, and this is a positive flow this month, beg your pardon. So no brackets this time. Okay, in this month our inflows were greater than our outflows. So if we were 220 down and we made 1,280 of positive cash flow in March, our closing balance at the end of March is £1,060. Okay, That £1,060 then goes up and becomes our opening balance for April. I'm not going to keep kind of working it through because basically the process kind of continues to work the same way. What I do want to come back to have a little bit of a look at though is this situation down here. Okay, so at the end of February, okay, this business could potentially be in a little bit of trouble actually, because at the end of February, according to its cash flow forecasting, this business is going to have a negative cash flow. Okay, it is not going to make a loss. That's an entirely different concept, and using the words profit or loss with a cash flow forecast will mark your answer wrong. Okay, so this is a negative closing balance. Okay, here. It's £220, okay? It is not loss, all right? I will get very angry with people if they start writing loss because it's not true. It's incorrect. You will get an X next to it and you will lose any marks where you refer to it as loss, okay? So if you then continue to use that in an analysis chain, the whole analysis chain will be worth nothing, okay? This is a negative closing balance, all right? The clue is over here. It says it right there in the name, closing balance, okay? It does not say profit or loss. Closing balance. So that is a negative closing balance. So why is that useful information for a business manager to know? Well, firstly, it's obviously beneficial because it means that he could now try and perhaps alter the spending that he is doing that month. So, you know, he knows that he's got £4,120 of outflow in that month. It could well be maybe that he will try and perhaps reduce the spending on materials in that month or something like that to try and bring that negative closing balance to be positive. It is entirely possible, though, obviously, that he can't actually do that. That he does need to buy those £1,500 worth of materials. So really then we need to think about how the business can manage that £220 negative balance. So we've said that we have a negative closing balance, okay, of £220 at the end of February, okay. And now we've got to think about what this business can actually do to deal with that, okay? Now, there are some solutions. I'm sure that you've already spotted some of them, okay? One option might be to take out a bigger loan in January, okay? If you remember, we took out a loan for £6,000 in January to help get the business started up. So if we were to take out a loan of, say, £6,500 in January, that would have given us enough spare capacity to cover that negative closing balance. Okay. We could also, as I mentioned on the previous slide, we could attempt to alter payment dates for materials. Okay, so the business could also try and maybe negotiate a credit arrangement with their supplier. Might well be difficult to get as a startup business, but it might be worth a try. Alternatively, as we said, the manager might attempt to try and reduce his purchase of materials in that month if they are not absolutely necessary, to try and reduce that negative balance. Third option, okay, would be to seek an overdraft. Okay, and this is perhaps the most common approach. Getting an overdraft is the most common approach to dealing with these sorts of very temporary negative closing balances. Okay, and basically the overdraft, as you will remember, is where you make an arrangement with the bank so that you can take more money from your account than there is actually in the account for a short period of time and up to an agreed limit. So what the owner of this bank, this business might decide to do is go to the bank, show them this cash flow forecast and demonstrate to them that actually, you know, in terms of their business, once they get past this initial hurdle, this initial negative closing balance, actually they're okay. But what they might need is an overdraft in February, just to cover those £220 of additional expense. So they may seek an overdraft of, say, £500 to give themselves a little bit of slack, something like that. Okay, so that would then enable them to go slightly overdrawn in February to cover that closing balance of £220. Which would mean that then obviously they would be able to continue to operate into future months. And that's why it's such a useful exercise to do this cash flow forecasting, because it actually brings together all of the sorts of spending and inflow that the business has, and it enables them to identify problems such as this so that they can actually go and deal with them. And as with, I mean, not just related to business, but as with everything that you guys will encounter later in life, it's much, much better to preempt problems and to take steps to avoid them making things particularly difficult for you. It's much better to do that than to carry on and just hope that somehow the business will end up selling enough to cover these costs and so on. Okay, so it's really important, okay, for a business to be able to calculate its cash flow so that it can identify future problems such as this negative closing balance, and then more importantly to take steps such as these 3 that we've got on the screen now to actually address them. So I hope that that's a useful little introduction to you in terms of actually how we go about building a cash flow forecast. We're going to do some more practice on this in class, but we also will need to think a little bit more about how businesses will go about doing this, and also some of the difficulties involved in forecasting business cash flow. But that's it for this brief lesson on actually putting the cash flow forecast document together.